when India got independence, the first and foremost challenge that the government of India faced was to feed the country. Today we are 1.4 billion. But I think what a remarkable task that India has done is that it went into what I call and I feel is what the world needs today to draw a lesson, is that India went into food self-sufficiency. Producing the food within the country for the population, I think, was a remarkable role played by India. And there were policy, of course, decisions which helped do that. And we have now seen in the recent context of the pandemic and post-pandemic, especially the war between Russia and Ukraine, 30 countries are directly hit because they don't have food. They were dependent on Russia and Ukraine region. Whereas a country like India has a surplus of food production today. But the question here is one, that, if the world had continued what India had laid out, to be self-reliant or self-sufficient in agriculture, probably we wouldn't have been hit by the war as much as we are hit now. I think it is a message clearly for the international leadership that, we must stop telling people or the countries that depend more on competitive value chains or competitive international supply chains. This is something which made countries like Egypt, for instance, move away from self-sufficiency into depending on the value chains or supply chains. Egypt is depending or sourcing 80% of its food from Russia. This situation tells us very clearly that the world needs to go back now, pick up on the food self-sufficiency model that India had laid out, and I think that is the way forward for the world. The introduction of agriculture into WTO was clearly a message that we are wanting the concentration of power, food power, to go into the hands of some corporates. And these are the corporates which actually decide globally as to where the food is to be produced, who is to produce that food, and what kind of food is to be produced for the people. There was a time when we used to romanticize with food. The French food is special. The Indian food is special. Of course, we have huge diversity of food range in India. So would be the Chinese and, for that matter, other countries. But look at where we are entering now. Go to any place, I come to Lyon, you go to Paris, you go to Geneva, whatever you find the same kind of food selling everywhere. My God, what is happening to this world? We have narrowed down our food choices. I thought we should have expanded our food choices. I think it is time for all of us to start looking at what modernization means. It is, again, as I said, it is not concentration of power in the hands of few food conglomerates. It is putting that thing in the hands of the people. Let them decide, let them cook their own food, let them make their own food. This impression that the industry gives us is, oh, you don't have time, so therefore we will cook chapatis for you and sell it. My God, why do you need chapatis already packed and then you try to heat it or warm it and eat it? Why can't you make your own chapatis? I ask youngsters, why are they doing this? The answer I get is, oh, we have no time. What were you doing? You were watching the T20 cricket match. You have no time, but you are watching the cricket match. But you don't realize that, this is important or that cricket match is important. This is just an example. As we all know, Indian farmers had 1 year-long protest in India outside the gates of New Delhi, and that meant that millions of farmers moved on to New Delhi and stood there or slept there on the streets for over a year. What they are demanding is that they need to get a guaranteed income for their produce. And when I said earlier, if you remember, when I said market forces in agriculture have created a kind of a dissatisfaction all across the world, whether in America or in European Union or in France, it's the markets which decide the price, and they are exploitative, ruthlessly exploitative. Why? Because the entire economic design is cast in a manner that you have to keep agriculture in that particular situation. Why? Because industry needs cheap labor, which will come from agriculture. Industry needs cheaper raw material, which will come from agriculture. Nobody is bothered globally to ensure that the people who produce food for the population, as you mentioned, are also at least sleeping, well fed. Unfortunately, majority of the farmers who produce food for the rest of the world themselves sleep hungry. Now, that is something people don't realize. People like you and me who live in the cities have no idea what agriculture is all about. Now, I think that disconnect is what has led to this crisis. And I would blame my generation, the generation which had links with the farming sector, to have failed in educating the younger people as to where their food comes from. Markets are not a better judge of what farmers or food prices should be. Let me give you an example. I think that will make people understand. Coffee is another industry which is $200 billion. It gets into future trading, it gets into commodity trading, and there are big giants like in chocolates, we deal with that. There is no minimum support price or there is no government intervention and so on. Now look at it. Coffee growers, according to a barometer study, it clearly tells us that coffee growers are getting or earning, majority are earning less than $1.9 a day, which is the acute poverty line. Now imagine $200 billion industry and the farmers are not even getting 1% of that. What kind of agriculture is this? What kind of market economy is this? What the world needs is to ensure that whether you are growing coffee beans or whether you are growing cocoa beans or whether you are growing banana, there has to be a minimum price below which nobody will be able to buy. Why not? Let farmers also make or earn a better profit or better earning for himself. As far as agriculture is concerned, the answers are very simple. World must ensure that farmers, wherever in the world they are, they should get a minimum support price, a living price, a price which gives their children hope, which can give children a little bit of more capacity or expectation that they will have a wonderful life. That is the kind of price that agriculture must get. In the context of climate change, because climate change has now opened our eyes, in the context of climate change, we need to understand that today agriculture is a big contributor in climate change. Now, I know, interestingly, what is happening globally. Everyone is targeting agriculture as if it is a villain of the story. 1/3 of the greenhouse gas emissions comes from agriculture. I agree with it. That has to change. It has to change from intensive farming systems to agroecological farming systems. That's what agriculture needs. And the third and the foremost is that the international trade regime that we have worked out, with WTO, GATT, your question earlier also, should be redesigned or reopened or re-looked at to ensure that we do not actually help the food giants. Today the global design is that you create a thinking that, the competitive, quote unquote, look at the terms economists produce, lovely, competitive. What is competitive? The more you exploit the poor farmer, the more competitive you are, and everybody is appreciating it. It is not that hope builds up a kind of a future, but I am so hopeful that whatever I started 30 years back or 35 years, started speaking or started advocating, started arguing, is what I feel more and more people are listening and getting acknowledging that. I think that gives me tremendous hope. And I believe in one thing, sir, there would be leadership changes all across. We know what kind of leaders we have got, but someday, expect somebody sensible to come and take over, one country, second country. And as Archimedes had said once, he said, give me a pole long enough to lift the world. It is not difficult. You can definitely lift the world if you have that long pole with you. So I am hoping that each one of us will carry that long pole.